This recording is protected by copyright. No part may be reproduced without the prior permission of the University of South Australia.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jacinta Thompson, and I'm the Executive Director and Events and Exhibitions Producer for the Bob Hawke Prime Ministerial Centre. Before we begin, I would like to invite Uncle Frank Wanganeen, member of Burkandi, which is the UniSA Elders in Residence program, and he will provide the welcome to country. Thank you, Uncle Frank.
Yeah, thank you, Cinda. It's a real pleasure to be tonight to be able to do the welcome to country and do it in the Ghana language. So I just start off by doing the welcome to country in the Ghana language. So Nai Tampati Tawilla Burkiana, Nai Tampati Bamba Bayarendi, Ghana Yurtiana, Maratianga Ghana Miona, Nai Wangari Mani Nai Budni, Ghana Yurtiana, Tanda Nyanga Wadliana. So what I just said is that I just want to acknowledge the ancestors and also recognise where we hold in this event is on Ghana country. And on behalf of the Ghana people, I want to welcome you all here to the UniSA conference that you attended today. So, Natalia, thank you.
Thank you, Uncle Frank, for joining us this evening and providing the welcome to country. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all here tonight for the 2022 ARA and Hawke Centre conversation, My Story, My Way. The Hawke Centre and the University of South Australia are pleased to be co-presenting tonight's event with the Australian Refugee Association, and I would like to thank ARA CEO Deb Stringer and all her hard-working, amazing team for your, looking around the room at everyone, thank you, for your truly wonderful work in making tonight's event come to fruition. So well done. Now, this is a long-standing partnership between the Hawke Centre and ARA, and I'm thrilled that we can continue to build on this for many years to come. I hope, Deb, that's the plan. We will make this work. I would also like to welcome the Honourable Emily Burke, MLC Assistant Minister to the Premier. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. The Australian Refugee Association board members who are joining us, and of course our wonderful guest speakers tonight. I now ask that you please join me in welcoming the Honourable Emily Burke, MLC, Assistant Minister to the Premier, to officially open the 2022 ARA and Hawke Centre conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacinta, and thank you to Uncle Frank Wanganeen for your welcome to country. I would also like to start off by giving a very big namani, Mani Napudni, Nainari Emily Burke, Ghana Mina Nunajul, Ghana Yata Tempeninthi. I hope I've got that right. It is an absolute pleasure to be here, and I'd also like to thank Deb Stringer for having me here tonight as well, and all the panellists that will be speaking after me, and congratulate them for giving their time as well. I am representing the Honourable Zoe Beddison, who is the Minister for Multicultural Affairs this evening, who is unfortunately unable to join you, and she sends her sincere apologies. I'd also like to thank the Bob Hawke Prime Ministerial Centre for hosting us tonight. Just as a little bit of random background, this centre obviously has a very soft spot for me being a Labor member of a political party. Its ethos of this centre is strengthening our democracy, valuing our diversity and building our future, which I think is a very significant ethos to be looking at tonight when we're considering the subject we're discussing. But in 2010, I had the pleasure of driving Bob Hawke to an event. and he was the character you think he would be in the car. And we arrived at the Colonnade Shopping Centre, and he wasn't too happy about walking into the Colonnade Shopping Centre, but when he got there, he walked in and he just transformed into the Bob Hawke we all know. And I tell this story because it still gives me goosebumps thinking about how he was received. He was overwhelmingly swarmed like a seagull. He was the chip and there were seagulls running to him. He brought people together. No matter who they were, what their background was, people probably never remembered him as being a Prime Minister, but he was a person that brought them together. He walked into that shopping centre and was able to do that just in 2010. And I dare say a lot of the younger ones that were running up to shake his hand did not remember him being the Prime Minister, but he was still able to carry that influence of bringing people together, which I think is an important message for tonight. It's so lovely to see people here packing out a theatre again, and it's nice to be able to come together as a community to celebrate the 36 years since Refugee Week was first celebrated in Sydney. From the event, Refugee Week quickly took on a national prominence, and by 1988 it was celebrated in communities across Australia. This year, there are over 40 Refugee Week events, forums, community days, which have been organised across South Australia. It is through events like this one that South Australians of all ages can hear people from refugee and migrant backgrounds telling their stories. As tonight's panel, you will undoubtedly demonstrate, we will have much to learn from the rich and varied experiences people from refugee and migrant backgrounds are willing to share. Refugee Week events give us all valuable insights into the challenges refugees face, often on a daily basis, especially during the early years of their settlement. And with the growing knowledge and improved understanding, we can all celebrate the many contributions people from refugee and migrant backgrounds continue to make to communities across Australia. Here in South Australia, multiculturalism has always been one of our biggest assets. The state government is proud to support and work with individuals and multicultural organisations and communities to share their language, cultures and traditions in our everyday. In Refugee Week and throughout the year, multicultural communities across South Australia are telling us about their stories through a range of art forms. And this representation really does matter. We all benefit when there is a diversity of voices and experiences available to us. As audience members, the key message or lessons we take away from these events and exchange will vary. But we can all agree it takes incredible courage to share your artwork and to share your story. For someone, telling their story is a celebration. For others, it is a path to healing, which is the theme of Refugee Week this year. Healing is very important, but often a forgotten aspect of refugee experiences. While refugees come from different parts of the world and have very different experiences, all need time to work through the trauma, grief, and sense of loss of belonging to their homeland. In many cases, this healing process can take years and require care, compassion, and understanding. It is through the journey of healing that many refugees find their voice and the courage to start a new life in a new home. Refugees are often the unsung heroes and quiet members of our communities. When refugees and people from migrant backgrounds do speak up, we must listen. Through courage, resilience, and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances and characteristics that help strengthen our vibrant and diverse multicultural society, equally, their knowledge and skills help build a stronger economy, providing valuable experiences and innovations to a range of sectors. Tonight's event is Refugee Week and is a timely reminder to protect and respect our refugee and migrant community storytellers. Their stories are South Australian stories. Thanks again to the panel members for making the time to be here tonight and for sharing their life experiences and perspectives with us. I also thank the Bob Hawke Institution again for having us here, and I really do thank every single one of you for making this event possible by giving your time and being here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Burke, for opening tonight's event and for joining us this evening. So it is now my pleasure to welcome our MC for tonight, who will take over proceedings, fresh off the plane from New York. I'm so glad he's here. We were all very nervous for a few days, but thank you for joining us, Stephen. Stephen Tongan, I'm sure many of you know already, is a graduate of Flinders University Law School and a professional stage and screen actor and professional motivator. Please, a warm welcome to Stephen Tongan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacinta, for that wonderful intro. As she just said, I've just landed from New York, so please excuse the hoarseness of my voice. I've been on a plane for about 20 hours, but it was strange. I left New York on Monday lunchtime and I arrived last night, so there you go. But I'm so happy to be here. It's an absolute pleasure. I want to thank ARA, I want to thank the Hawke Centre for having me and really celebrating this monumental week, Refugee Week, which means so much to me, being that, my story wouldn't be what it is if I wasn't a refugee. For many, many years, I used to think being a refugee was something that everyone looked on as a negative thing. But I'm living proof that by giving somebody a chance to improve their lives, they can certainly have the opportunity to reach for their dreams and make the most out of the life that they've been given. So I never take that for granted. Yes, please, let's clap for that. I firstly want to say, by welcoming refugees and giving them an open arms, and I guess just showing them love is really a great foundation to not only establish the relationship that we all have with each other living as Australians, but more importantly, just the dignity that we all should treat each other with love and respect. So my story. So yeah, as it says there, I am a MC, I guess. I'm a lawyer by day and MC by night. Some of you might have seen me on Hindley Street screaming my lungs out, trying to entertain people. That was pre-COVID. Now I stick to doing weddings and things like beauty pageants and that sort of stuff. But most importantly, it says there, professional motivator. I think it really sort of just describes my personality. I'm a very positive person. And during COVID, I was one of the people that really didn't have much work. Migration had sort of slowed down. Venues, acting was, I guess, almost kind of, non-existent. But I took the time to really focus on the things that I loved, which was inspiring people and telling my story. And if it does make a difference to anyone's life, I'm very much happy to share. So just to give you a backdrop, my story really started in South Sudan. I was born in South Sudan in 1988. And I was born during a time when, I guess, the civil war had pretty much heated up in South Sudan at the time. It was Sudan, but it's now South Sudan. And really, the town that I was born in, Juba, was pretty much caught in the crossfires. You had the government on one side, and you had what they called rebels on another side. And the city being right in the middle, everyone was sort of bombing and shelling each other. And, we were one of the victims, and many victims that were pretty much caught up in all of that. They estimate about 3 million people died because of that civil war. So really my story is one of many. I'm one of the lucky ones. Me and my family managed to get away. We have a saying in Africa, a proverb that says, when two elephants are fighting, the grass suffers the most. And that was pretty much our story. Many of us didn't have exit plans. We didn't know where we were going or what was going to happen. Luckily, my parents were, I guess, you could describe them as middle class. And so they were able to afford for us to get a flight to go to Kenya. We moved to Kenya, not knowing many people. Kenya obviously was a neighboring country, which made it a lot easier for us to cross. But there's so many that didn't get a chance, so many family members that had to find their own ways to exile. But we arrived in Nairobi, Kenya, and, the story really for us, for me anyway, it really started then We arrived really with just the clothes on our backs and the family members that were with us. From then, we lived in a place called Kibera. Being a refugee, obviously, you had two options. You could either live in the cities or go to the refugee camps. For many, the refugee camps were the only options, but for some lucky ones, they were able to live in the cities. But because, obviously, if you didn't have much of an income, which was the case because as a refugee, you're not allowed to work. So we found ourselves in Kibera, and for me, the experience living in Kibera was bittersweet. I say that because out of the adversity that we faced there, we also had some beautiful moments. I've come to realize, it's the people that don't have much that are often the most willing to give. We had a great sense of community. Everyone poured in each other. It didn't matter what background or tribe you were from. The fact that we were all looking for a home or poor just made us all have similar interests. But my life there was really also difficult simply because I was the last born in my family. So being the last of 8 kids, I know a lot of people sort of bag last borns. I don't know why, but for some reasons, I don't know, my siblings didn't really like me much. Which is really hard to say because I was actually quite a cute baby, but I think the main reason was really, for me, my family was really it was our support structure. But my parents really poured a lot of love and whatever resources they had on our education. The fact that we were refugees did not mean that we lacked or we weren't. The fact that we're refugees, basically, it shouldn't have prevented us from getting a good education. So my parents really made sure that whatever they had would go on to that. One of the things, like I said, they didn't have work, but being a refugee, you become so resilient and you find ways in terms of making ends meet. For us, my father purchased a bus, a matatu, as some of you may know, which was basically just like a taxi. And at least that was able to give us a weekly or daily income to sustain and support us. But like I said, most of the money went into our education. And so from then on, I knew the importance of education and I saw the sacrifices that my family had made. Fast forward a little bit, we got the call 12 years into our time living in Kenya that we had actually received a humanitarian visa to come to Australia. And let me tell you, for me, that was like winning the lotto. We had applied to so many different places, the US, Canada. I'm grateful that we didn't go to the US or Canada. It's too cold up there for starters. But Australia became an option because we had a family member who had come here and had told us how good it was. Adelaide, obviously, at the time was a much preferred place for my parents simply because my parents wanted my older siblings to study and get an education as well. So we came to Adelaide. And Adelaide basically welcomed us with open arms. During that time, we didn't have many Africans around, but the community that was here was very, very, very accommodating and welcoming. In fact, we had the help of ARA to settle in, St. Vincent de Paul. So many different organizations really played an integral part in trying to make us fit in at that time. And I'm forever grateful for that today. So even being here, it's just an absolute pleasure. But so I arrived here and the first thing we were told was, we would have to go to school. So you need to pick a school for you to go to. And lucky enough for us, we had a family friend who was heavily involved in the Catholic Church. And they insisted on us as boys to go to CBC, Christian Brothers College, that is. I can see my former teacher, Ms. Tiedemann, there. Hello. One of the nicest human beings I've ever met there. But my sister went to Loreto. And so there the education in Australia began. And just to give you a perspective, I came from the 844 system, which basically meant, discipline meant that you are beaten. There was no being told off to the corner or anything like that. You physically got beaten. Hands, bombs, you name it. So coming to Australia and being told, for instance, be quiet, go to that corner. I thought, this is a great education system. These people understand education. It felt like I was actually in more like a prison back there, but for me, it opened up so much. It opened up the world of creative endeavors. I became more interested in drama because I really wanted to not only increase my confidence, performing, but most importantly, just do the things that I never really got the chance to do. And really, that was my motto. I came to Australia with the ambition to just do as much as possible. I never said no to any opportunities, and I always took everything as an experience. And so I had my time at CBC, finished there with flying colors, Mr. Tideman, am I right? But I was fortunate enough to finish at 12 and get into law school at Flinders. And that was really when I knew, for me, I wanted to give back to the community, but also help other people come to resettle in Australia. Migration law was one of the things I was passionate about. Human rights law as well, being that I'd come from a refugee background. So it really just made sense. The acting and all that sort of stuff was really just a bonus. I don't know. Being a refugee, you're always told that you're different and, there's things you may not be able to do. But here in Australia, I became, I guess, just, everyone's best friend. And I found that the more willing I was to tell my story, the more doors were opening. And so that had really sort of just led to me just doing all the things that I do, from acting to stage to all sorts of different performances that I've done. So in a nutshell, for me, that was pretty much my story. Now currently sort of promoting a movie called Spiderhead, which is on Netflix. Do we have any Netflix lovers out there? So put that on your watch list tonight. It's called Spiderhead. It's a wonderful movie. It's a psychological thriller, and it really touches on a lot of key things that are happening in the world today. I also have other projects like Stateless, which, for those of you that know, is a story about the immigration detention centers in Australia. I really urge each and every one of you to watch it. It's beautifully, beautifully portrayed, and it really tells a story of how our government treated refugees and asylum seekers, but more importantly, I think it points out what we should not be doing as a society. So for me, I'm passionate about telling such stories. I'm passionate about us really focusing on our similarities as human beings and really building an Australia that all of us can be proud of. And really, like I said, for me, it's always just been about just trying to inspire people by my actions and my stories. So I hope I'm certainly doing that, but I won't take too much time because I know we have a lot of things to cover. But thank you so much for this opportunity. And I hope you will enjoy all the creative people that are going to be speaking here today. Thank you. Now that I'm done talking about myself, you can see how relaxed I am, right? I'm going to introduce the next speaker. The next speaker is Jelena Dinic. Jelena Dinic, who arrived in Australia in 1993 during the collapse of Yugoslavia, writes in Serbian and English. She's the recipient of the Georgetown Literary Exchange and the Art Space Residency in Rimbun Dahan, Malaysia, and the Eleanor Duck Foundation Burana Writers Retreat in the Blue Mountains. Her first collection, In the Room, with the She-Wolf, was selected for the Adelaide Festival 2020 Premier's Unpublished Manuscript Award. Her poetry and short stories have been published in journals and anthologies, including the Australian Book Review, the Australian Poetry Anthology, the Australian Poetry Journal, the Best Australian Poems, Going Down Swinging, and Westerly, among others. When not writing poetry, Jelena is dedicated to working with students and families from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, supporting their inclusion, settlement, learning, and well-being. She lives in the Adelaide Hills with her family. Please, ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Jelena Dinic.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I only did year 12 here. in Adelaide, but I can see my teacher from here too, as well. So that's great. Thank you to ARA and the Hawke Centre for inviting me to be here tonight. We're meeting on the Ghana land. This always was and always will be their land. As a migrant woman, it has been a great privilege to live, work and raise family here in Ghana country with an awareness of how important it is to be connected to country while also recognising that we have a lot to learn. In the middle of the Refugee Week, I would like to recognise and acknowledge families around the world today who are forced to leave their homes in search for safety and freedom. I was born in a country that doesn't exist anymore. I was brought up by strong and amazing women, and one of my grandmothers said to me when I was young that only if you know your poets, you can know your country and your people. So I read Desanka Maksimović, Aleksa Šantić, Milan Rakić, and of course Vasco Popa. Those poets laid the foundation of my love for reading and writing. In the Room with the She-Wolf was published last year by Wakefield Press and was launched in October by my mentor, Mike Led. The wolves in Eastern Europe are part of our storytelling and folklore tradition. They are main characters in fairy tales and in fables. They have human characteristics. The title carries a poem in the collection, and it is about a moment when I found my old dress. I felt like I met my old self. It was a strange meeting and complicated on many levels, but it was also a moment when I realised there was no going back. Tonight I'm reading a poem, J Like Why. J Like, the title was actually a strategy for people to remember my name. The strategy didn't work. J Like Why. Nightmares don't stop just because you change your bed, my grandfather shouted at the unhitched gate. We have packed tomato seeds underneath our culture and language. Anything to declare? Yes, we have arrived. Where are you from? Yugoslavia. Sorry, the country doesn't exist anymore. Serbia? No, it's not on our list yet. What's the next one down? Asked a friend behind me. Siberia. Good, put that one in. Can you spell? No, I knew no magic. But if I could, I would cast a spell, change things back to the way they were. I have mail for you, love. No, love, I say, snatching the letters from these dangerous men on the motorbike. Cross, cross, don't you understand past tense? You had a house, you had friends. Remember the names, Dragisha, Ljubisha, Dragoslav, Miroslav, Gustav, Fyodor and Anton. People think if they speak louder, I understand better. Remember the names, Andrew, Nathan, Nigel, James, and a cool Serbian guy called Michael. My name? It half rhymes with JFK's inspiring speech to the people of Berlin. Ich bin ein Berliner. I cry in mother tongue, mostly in the library. Open the first page, last page, back to the middle, shut it, make a mind map, make a mind map. How do you find again things you left behind? Obsessively repeat Popper's poems. Give me back my rags. Give me when I ask you nicely. The little box continues growing. The cupboard that she was inside is now inside her. The little box remembers her childhood, and by a great longing, she becomes a little box again. Let's see you find the world now. At 20, I learned to laugh. Knock, knock, who is there? Michael. Michael who? The overseas lines are breaking. May your children leave you when you need them the most. My father fears his father's curse. I'm falling in love with Adelaide, but Adelaide often tests my heart. Where are you from? I'm a citizen of Berlin, suddenly pops into my head. From here? Not really, where are you from? Thank you. When we arrive in a new country, we bring with us our language, our tradition, our experiences, and a great awareness of what it means to have a country, lose it, and then return to it. If not by plane, if not by aeroplane, then through the stories we tell our children, through the photographs we may have kept, if we are lucky to have a few, and through the food we share with others. Stories at the dinner table are certainly closing the gap between us and our children. Storytelling for me as a child was about listening with eyes wide open. Language is a living thing. It changes. Through poetry, we try to describe the truth and write with the responsibility to tell the truth. It is important to share the journey we've been on, and it's important to be heard. Storytelling is also about those who listen and nurture vulnerable voices and give license to others to do the same. It is that feeling of support that is important to making a positive difference. We can't go back to change the past, but we do have a certain control over our present narrative. Soon after I learned English, I began writing my diary in English. The good thing about that was I could leave it freely on my desk, and my parents couldn't make much of it. In today's world where our attention span is 2 minutes, it seems that a story needs to be short, sharp, and powerful. We are often horrified at the images on TV and in the news, but we hardly think it might happen to us. If it happened to my country, it can happen to any other. And it did. Syria, Afghanistan, Myanmar, Ukraine, to name a few. We follow world events from the comfort of our homes, and we do have the luxury to switch to Netflix anytime, and that is okay. But in the morning, we might need to begin a new sentence or a new chapter and support people around us to be heard and to be recognized. Words have the power to drive change. Tolstoy said that a word in a poem can enter your subconscious with such a power that you will go and change the world. My writing is influenced by the Serbian literary tradition and culture, but it is also a reflection on how I was raised and taught. It gave me the permission to be me on page. With a blank page, I'm in control of my narrative. My writing journey has been supported by some incredible Adelaide writers, and I often look up to them for some advice and guidance. It's not always easy to tell the story, but we do connect through it. Through centuries, good storytelling kept people alive, their communities productive and peaceful. It shaped societies for better. In 1001 Night, Scheherazade tells a story each evening to her king, leaving it incomplete and promising to finish it the following night. The stories are so entertaining, and the king so eager to hear the end, that he puts off her execution from day to day and finally abandons his cruel plan. If I lose sight of who I am, I remember my grandmother's words, "Only if you know your poets, you can know your country and your people." Our stories are the foundation of our identity. They are part of our resilience and our experiences. And they are needed in order to move forward, story after story, night after night, into the brighter future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elena, for sharing that wonderful, wonderful speech of yours. But most importantly, the poem was just beautiful, She-Wolf. I really resonate with that. You know, I feel like people butcher my name all the time. You know, growing up, it was always Stefan Pitia Tongun, came to Australia and it's Stephen Tongan. Maybe I should write a poem myself. I should write a poem about it maybe too. The next person I'm about to introduce is Cecile Saeedy from Masaka Productions. When Cecile Saeedy was 6 months old, a war broke out in her country, forcing her family to flee to a neighboring country, Tanzania, where they found refuge in a refugee camp. The family was granted visas by the Australian government and arrived in Australia in 2005. Cecile graduated from the University of South Australia in 2018 with a Bachelor of Communication and Media. majoring in English and creative writing. In her final year of study, she participated in a 3-week creative writing tour in Malaysia, where her passion for collecting stories, especially of people with different walks of life, was fueled. In 2018, she started working for the Adelaide Football Club, the Adelaide Crows, as their very first multicultural liaison officer, introducing the club to the multicultural scene of South Australia and involving them in conversations that may or may not have been comfortable. She left the Crows to embark on an uncomfortable journey of self-rediscovery, consciously and fully participating in her own story. That led her into starting a podcast, One Conversation, in 2020, exploring and celebrating the differences and similarities in the human experience through story and conversation. In 2021, she started going on monthly camping trips around South Australia on her own. Recently, Cecile founded Masaka Productions, an African storytelling and theater company which aims to tell and celebrate African stories the African way. Please, ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Cecile Saeedy.
I hope that performance didn't scare anyone. Well, I was asked to share my story my way, so you're welcome. I must confess, I was a little nervous when I was approached today to participate in this event as a guest speaker. Because over the past few years, I've come to learn and to appreciate that my journey isn't just mine. My story is not mine alone. This is my father's story, my mother's story, my brothers and sisters' stories, the story of my uncles, my aunties, my ancestors, my roots. Because when mine began, many others were sacrificed, lost, but hopefully not in vain. And so I stand here to share with you my journey, my story, and as I do, I'm aware that I'm also sharing the journey of those who have come before me and those who are yet to come. So I hope that I do so with respect. I will start by saying, respectfully, that my experience as a refugee was not sad. At least not while I was in the camp. That was very fun for me. I suppose I was particularly fortunate for two reasons. One, I didn't realize I was in a camp. I was only 6 months old when we arrived in the camp, when my family arrived in the camp, when the war broke out and we arrived in the camp in Tanzania. My very first memories were formed in this camp. This was home. I didn't know anything beyond this. And second, I was surrounded by a very large family. And not just my immediate family, but cousins. My father had 11 siblings, and they each had at least 5 kids, so a big family. And don't even mention my mother's side. There are at least 100 of them. So I had community, I had family, I had just about everything that I needed. Life for me was all about eating, sleeping, and playing. I was the happiest of children. I look back now and I realize I was the luckiest. And I didn't even know. We were in this camp for 8 years, after which my family received protection, was granted protection by the Australian government. And in 2005, we came out to Australia as refugees. And this was the start of the end of my status as a refugee. This was also the start of a great challenge. My family and friends were left behind, that is, my extended family, but in my culture, there is no such thing as extended family, you're all one. And so I felt displaced because my family and friends were left behind. We had to learn a new language in this new land, tackle new cultures, and integrate into the new system. But at least we had each other, my immediate family, and together I think we managed to adapt to our new home. But I went through primary school and high school feeling out of place, going to school only because I had to. I absolutely hated school. I hated that I looked different, spoke different, and the media didn't help. My idols didn't promote the idea that an African woman or an African person is beautiful. Rihanna didn't have an afro. Beyonce didn't have an afro. Oprah Winfrey did not have an afro. Even Michelle Obama does not have an afro. Not even curly hair. And I think to myself, is this what my ancestors fought for? I felt lost and out of place. My wake-up call came in the form of a tutor at university. In 2017, I was lucky to participate in a 3-week creative writing study tour in Malaysia. All expenses paid for. So, this was funded by the New Colombo Plan scholarship, for which this tutor applied and won for the university. This trip changed my life forever, I can just about say. I remember one day we were watching a traditional Malaysian dance performance. It was smooth, it was gentle, it was quiet, very feminine. It was beautiful. Now, you saw our little performance earlier today. That was not very quiet. I am a Bembe woman, and my people are loud. We are loud with our bodies, our drums, our celebrations. I absolutely love it. But back then, I found it embarrassing, humiliating. So when we were watching the performance in Malaysia, I commented that I wished my people's dances were more like that, more gentle, feminine, not so loud and in your face. My tutor, who had won the scholarship for the university and who was in charge of this trip, turned to me in surprise. I could see the genuine surprise in her eyes. I can't remember exactly what she said, but she said something along the lines of, "You have got to be kidding me. Cecile, you're African. Your people have some of the best dancers in the world." I could see it in her eyes that she genuinely believed what she said, and this made all the difference. She's here tonight. She's in the crowd. I won't mention her name, but you know who you are. I never told you this. I never told you this back then, or even after uni, but your response made all the difference. Your response popped my little bubble I was living in. It opened a very important door for me, which began a journey of self-discovery. This is when my journey with my roots and cultures in general began. Soon after this trip, I started working with the Adelaide Football Club, the Adelaide Crows, as their very first multicultural liaison officer. In this role, I got to interact with just about all the multicultural communities here in South Australia. It was amazing. At work, people wanted to learn more about the multicultural communities here in South Australia and about my culture. I was pleasantly surprised. This encouraged me to look into my history, research about different African cultures, and I fell in love with what I discovered. I became more interested in the story of my parents and their parents, our dances, languages, our cultures. How did we get here? Why did we leave our home in the first place? And who started the war? And how is it that an African woman, a Bembe woman nonetheless, is called Cecile Saeedy? Cecile is a European name, and Saeedy is an Arabic name. How on earth was I supposed to feel comfortable in my own skin and feel proud about my people and their history with a name like that? Is that any wonder our African youth are turning away from their roots? Would it be a surprise that an African woman named Cecile would insist on wearing wigs that are, of long hair that look nothing like an African hair, like an afro? Would it come as a surprise if Saeedy appreciates and recognizes Arabic as a holy language and treats her own or his own as less than? The history of how these names came to be introduced in Africa is sad indeed, so I won't go there. But this opened my eyes. So many people died, sacrificed their lives so that I would be here today to share my journey, their stories with you. After all this, I thought it would be an absolute sin to continue to live as I did before, ashamed of my roots, disregarding the sacrifices of those who came before me. So now every opportunity that I get, I make it known that I'm an African woman, a Bembe woman, and I'm very proud of that. But I am just one. We are just a few. Majority of African youth are still confused, lost. The media doesn't help. It doesn't advertise my people in a very positive light. It's either poverty or crime or charity. These are the choices that you have. So we put on the wigs and we try as best as we can to fit in by removing the African within us. And who is there to teach us otherwise? Certainly not the mainstream media or even the education system, which fails to recognize the people of the land on which we are on. If the Aboriginal people are still fighting to have their voices heard on their own land, what choice do we have? What chance do we have, we Africans and those of us who came as refugees or migrants? Who is going to teach us and who is going to show us? Our elders. They are trying to survive in this new land, trying to understand what is happening, what is going on. They come from cultures whose teachings are passed down through stories, not books. Our mothers and our fathers, they have challenges of their own. Learn a new language, raise children who will feel safe enough in this new land, and hopefully receive grandchildren who will feel even safer. So who? And these questions bothered me everywhere I turned. So last year, after years of thinking, last year I founded Masaka Productions, which is an African storytelling company dedicated to telling African stories the African way. From our clothes, our music and dance, our cuisine, our languages, it's all about celebrating these. Masaka Productions is about serving as a mirror to our people here in Australia and hopefully beyond, to remind us that we are beautiful. We are a very small and a very young organization, so the challenges are grand. But I discovered something, or rather, I remembered something. I remembered that tutor who opened my eyes in Malaysia. I am certain that her response made a difference because she was not African. Had she been African, I would have disregarded her because obviously you're African, you'll say African dances are beautiful. And so I believe the same is the case for us, Masaka Productions. We need to engage people who are not African, to get them excited about African culture, African music, African dances, and then hopefully they will serve as a mirror to our African youth. So to address this, we came up with the idea of Masaka Village. This is an African festival, but more than just a festival. Basically, the idea is that for an entire weekend, we transform a city parkland into an African village, brought to life with African music, theatre, dance, food, storytelling, and much more. We've been communicating with the City Council, going back and forth, and at the moment the event is to be on the 11th, from the 11th to the 13th of November this year at Rundle Park. However, I'm not sure if any of you have visited the Rundle Park at the moment. It's in terrible shape, so it's being reformed, and so we're not sure if that's going to go ahead. But that's the idea, and to conclude my speech, I would like to honor that tutor to whom I owe a great deal. I would like to read you a short poem I wrote while on the creative writing tour in Malaysia. The poem is called Gloria, and it's about realizing or learning that, as a human being, you should always feel at home while on planet Earth. No matter what land or country you're on or from, because planet Earth is the home of human beings, and no one should ever feel less than for exploring different parts of this home respectfully. I wrote this poem when I was feeling rather homeless, in the sense that I didn't really feel at home anywhere. I felt lost at uni, as I wasn't sure about my future. I felt lost in Australia in general, because I wasn't exactly fitting in. And I felt even more lost when I visited Africa, because the society's expectations, especially of a young girl or young woman, are very different from what I grew up with. So as you can probably tell from the poem's title, Gloria, I wrote this poem before my bubble was properly popped. Of all the names I could have picked for this poem, Masaka, Enande, Wangaza, I picked an English name, Gloria. So this poem is called Gloria. Gloria, my love, I must confess, these fruits you have stolen, the secrets you have told, the hearts you have broken, these were all mine. Though I dine in silence, know that I note your crime against all that is pure and fine. Yes, the dove continues to roam above for you. You are a guest here. But know, my love, that I am broken, and though gently so, I have spoken of that which has failed to impress. Yes, a guest. But whose guest? You weep at night, you beg for my presence. Does the rain not fall as it did before? Is the heat not felt? You forget, my dear, that I'm always here should you ever fear the tide. Your tears, too, are mine, you know, and with time, you will come to learn that you are not alone. You were never alone. In fact, you are home. An act of kindness has you roaming the world. Make it your own. Then, my love, will you find me, and only then will I forgive the above. Gloria, my love, do not forget. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's keep those applause going, everyone, especially for that wonderful intro by your family, Cecile. That was wonderful. Now, I'm going to quickly just teach you some African sentiments. You know, when we do the ululating, that's what it's called, ululating. Fantastic. Can you hear that? Give it a try, everyone. I'm feeling like I'm in Africa already. For those of you, if you want beginner steps, you can just do this with your mouth. That'll get you there anyway, eventually. But thank you so much for sharing your story. That was absolutely beautiful. Thank you. Next up, I'm going to introduce the next speaker, Paula Fanus. is a performance poet, author, and educator. Paula Fanus is a Coptic Orthodox performance poet, author, and educator. Paula was the 2018 New South Wales Poetry Slam champion and has performed Australia-wide at locations including the Opera House, the Parliament House. Paula has published 2 books, a collection of poetry titled Strong Soft in 2018, and a devotional on discovering love through faith, Abba, Father, in 2021. Paula is currently completing his master's in secondary education or leading teaching at ACU, while teaching English and humanities at Echuca, Regional Victoria. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Paula Fanus.
Hello, Adelaide. It's really, really nice to be here. My wife and I affectionately call Adelaide Radelaide because we think it's pretty cool. So, my story, my way. My name is Paula Fanus. I'm a Coptic Orthodox Christian. That's a big part of my identity. It's a big part of why I am the way I am and who I am. I was born in Egypt, in Ain Shams, in Cairo, in 1998. And so was my brother, so it's kind of our story, but I'll tell my side. I have a twin brother. And at the age of 3, my parents moved to Australia because that's where our workers' visa was approved. And they saw that there was a significantly better future here than in Egypt. In Egypt, unfortunately, being a Coptic Christian, you're in the minority, and so you're kind of a second-class citizen in many ways, and my parents suffered patiently through that, but they decided they wanted better for my brother and I. So we moved to Western Sydney, to Mount Druitt, and we stayed in an apartment with very generous friends who had gone before us. It's a bit like Stephen was saying, it's like, come, it's good. So we came, it was pretty good. We moved around a lot. We lived in 8 different houses, always around Western Sydney, and that's because our church, our Coptic church, was located in Mount Druitt. And so I'm very fortunate in that most ethnicities are kind of separate from faith, but being Coptic Orthodox, it's essentially Egyptian Orthodox. And so I'd go to one place each week and I'd connect with my God, my family, my friends, and everyone else who had just moved from Egypt too. Same issues. And we kind of tried to work out who we were and what it meant to be Egyptian and Australian. My parents taught me very well what it meant to be Egyptian. But when it came to what it meant to be Egyptian and Australian, that's something I had to figure out for myself. Do I want to be half and half, or do I want to be mostly this and a bit of that? What do I say when people ask me, do you live in a pyramid? Or I still get that one, I really do. So, growing up, there was a lot of kind of discovering who I was and discovering how to express that. And being a man and being a sensitive man, it's not really open season to express your emotions. And so I figured I'll just become a poet and that'll give me a free pass. And it's worked pretty well so far. So I remember being confused in high school. And I remember having teachers who saw beyond that confusion and that acting out and said, I see who you are going to be, and I'm going to treat you with that respect. And those are the people that made a really, really big difference in my life. And so after falling in love with English, because I had an incredible English teacher, I studied English and then education, and my wife and I moved to Echuca as part of Teach for Australia to teach at Echuca College. And it's been fantastic. I wasn't very patient when I became a teacher. I'm still not patient, but I teach Year 7s, so we're on the way. For me, my story has always been about existing within the gaps, because we know what it means to be Australian and we know what it means to be Egyptian. In the middle, people are still working that out. We don't really have quantitative data. What we do have is qualitative data. We have voices and microphones. And so we can share what that's like and try to work out how to navigate those complex spaces. For me, look, it was bouncing back from Egyptian, Australian, poet, you know, trying to be what I thought was cool in high school, trying to be smart, and then realizing that I didn't need to earn acceptance or prove who I was, because I was already loved and accepted for who I was. And I found that through my faith, through my Orthodox faith and a relationship with Jesus, my King and God. And the wonderful thing is that's where I started to begin with, being imparted with that faith in that church community. And it was a whole roller coaster, and it still is a roller coaster, I'm not going to lie. But I have peace in this roller coaster because I have faith. So I'm going to perform a poem about that experience, and it's called The Jesus Prayer. Sorry if you're not religious, it's my story, my way. So. يا رب يسوع المسيح ارحمني أنا الخاطي. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. A sinner. Lord, I know men who have repeated these words in their hearts so many times. Their hearts spoke and their tongues were silent. As the prayer prayed itself and made itself known to the heart of heaven, it's hard to get it. You see, for me, I get stuck on those words, a sinner. Because I was taught it's good to be a winner. What good can come from me if I'm a sinner? One day I met a young lady who smiled at me and said, I wonder how, when you say those words, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, they don't weigh more than your sins. Don't you know that while we were still sinners, He died for you? I stood still, silent, stared into her eyes so deeply I saw my own. I cried, scoffed, and laughed at the same time. What does it mean to be human? I thought my sickness could not be healed by He who raised the dead. I thought my fumbling was not redeemable by the blood of God. I thought I was disqualified. My son, you are qualified, not quantified. You are my son, not my science experiment. I love you. I accept you. I will preserve. I will protect you. No one can snatch you from my hand. Don't you know I don't call the qualified, I qualify the called. I made the Red Sea move when Moses stuttered. I made Goliath fall when David was this small. I made a rock of Peter when he crumbled. Do you not think I can make a poet out of you when you fall and then are humbled? My Lord, forgive me. I have inquired into things far too wonderful for me. I have questioned the reach of the hands that hold the universe in their palms. I have your love, and that's enough. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Thank you so much.
You know, you may not live in a pyramid, but you're certainly a pharaoh to me, man. You're a king.
Thank you. I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. What a great panel. I didn't even have to say anything. Everyone's sitting down. I guess this is the part where we have an open discussion. And I guess really share our experiences based on the creative sort of fields that we're in. But I'm going to basically start with a question that we'll all get a chance to answer. And just to give the audience also a bit of a sort of backstory behind it. But the question is, as a society, we have never had more tools to tell our stories. And with that comes the opportunity to raise the voice of groups traditionally underrepresented in mainstream media. So the question is, how do you feel about representation in your field? So I'll start with you, Yelena.
Thank you. We certainly need to be more represented in the media and in the literature, especially. I'm sitting in at my desk in a quiet corner and trying to put my story on page, and then I would like to stop and you have this mental blank and you want to go and read something to pick yourself up through the process of writing, and then I look at my shelf and there is not enough representation, definitely not. So Australian literature is a rich source of life stories and experiences, but there's that big chunk that's definitely missing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I guess that's where you fit in as well, though, in terms of writing your stuff and making sure you're represented in those circles and forums, isn't it?
Yes, definitely, absolutely. I would, but I would also love to have had someone previously to refer to. But again, you kind of working your way through, and hopefully my daughter will be able to pick up the book off the shelf that would speak to her.
Fair enough. Cecile, would you like to
Yeah.
answer that? How do you feel about representation in your field?
I agree with you, Yelena. I think the tools are there, and more so today, but the tools are more readily available, say social media, that kind of thing, but are they welcomed and embraced by the society, by the education system, for instance? The books that the children are reading in schools are predominantly, Anglo-Saxon, and so yes, the tools are there, but I think as a society we need, those who are in power to kind of start driving that forward. Introducing books that are written by, Indigenous authors or those from a cold background or different background, so that when creatives start to see that, their works are being appreciated and read, then they're more, I suppose, encouraged to pursue those fields, I think.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think you're right. The saying that you can't be what you can't see is really important. For me, I guess it was important to venture into places that I've never really seen many of my kind in. And, I'm pleased to say that certainly with my coming to Australia, it's given me at least an opportunity to do that. I think if I was in Africa, for instance, would I be in some of these big movies and TV series? I don't know. I couldn't say, but I think the challenges certainly would be there. How do you feel about the question there?
In terms of representation, I've always been able to find parts of my identity represented. So I can find, Egyptian authors, Naguib Mahfouz, all these wonderful poets who, like you said, if you want to know a country, read its poets.
Very true.
And I can experience that, and I can experience, the spiritual writings and access that. Yeah. And I also love Western Sydney and rap music, right? And I can connect with a lot of people, and they will, and I connect with growing up there. But those things don't tend to go near each other. And like I said, it's more about what happens when you combine these three. And like you said, I guess that's our job to figure that out.
Yeah. Well, look, you are Egyptian, so you have an advantage because Egyptians, obviously, we all know the text they've written. It's unfortunate that Cleopatra took so many of those scripts to Rome, and some of them are hiding in the Vatican, from what I've been told.
Yes.
But it'd be great to sort of have more access to that. I think that's another thing.
I'll ask her when I go back to the pyramid.
Yeah, please do. But I think that's the truth, though, in terms of having access to your own culture and really sort of having people celebrating you in its entirety and not just sort of claiming certain things is important, right?
Yes, I think I do have a collection of Serbian authors on my shelf. Yeah. So they're there, they're not missing. But in terms of reaching out for someone with similar experiences like yours from your own country within Australian literary landscape, it's really hard. However, there are some really really great books coming out from culturally and linguistically diverse authors, and I think we are on a way as a society. But I think it's going to take some time.
No, very true. I'm certainly always pleased. A lot of my friends have started writing books, and poetry is a great way to do that. I've come to realize. A book doesn't necessarily have to be this thick, but more importantly, I think I've always had this ideology that if you live your life in such a way that somebody can write a book about it and people can learn from it, I think you're sort of on the right track. So congratulations to all you authors out there. I think we all need to give you guys a round of applause for taking that. So it leads us to the second question, which is storytelling can also be used to share personal experiences, to raise awareness about issues. And when people go through traumatic experiences, there can be a need from within or pressure from others to share their story. Have you ever felt forced or pressured to tell your story?
No, I've never been pressured to tell my story. I've been kindly asked, and that was really done in a sensitive way. And there was trust. Really, it was a trusting relationship. And once you establish that trust, it's kind of easy to tell your story. And I think we have a wonderful audience here tonight. So it's
a round of applause to you, wonderful audience.
Very pleased to tell the story.
Fantastic. Cecile?
Not particularly. I mean, I can remember one instance when I did feel that, but it wasn't necessarily because I was sharing my story. I think that would have happened in any circumstance, sharing anything. But in general, I think I love sharing my story. I find in general, and I love hearing other people's stories. So I've never necessarily felt pressured or forced in that sense. I've always been willing, and I've always had, I suppose, a willing audience. So. Yeah.
Just a quick one. This is a question slightly diverting it. Adelaide Crows. Did Port Adelaide approach you by any chance? I'm a Port man, and
Oh, okay.
I think there's more ululating in Port Adelaide games than the close games from what I've gathered. Watch out.
No, they didn't buy me.
Sorry. To you, Paula, how do you feel about, do you ever feel forced or pressured to tell your story?
Never forced or pressured. I did feel, like you said, a need from within to share my story for a long time. And that's just coming from a need to understand myself and be understood, which is a very human need. I have felt a pressure to tell a certain kind of story.
Yes.
A kind of tell us about the lovely foods and colours and stuff, but don't tell us about the war. That's a bit too bleak for Multicultural Day. Tell us about the happy things. And I'm always happy to share, but it's a whole package.
Very true. And then look, it's as we all know, many refugees go through different sort of experiences, and trauma is something that is, it's usually at the heart of it. For me personally, I do find sometimes it is difficult to talk about it, just because, you can, I guess, dig up some old wounds, but at the same time, it is essential to tell the story. And since we have the theme of healing, I think telling it sometimes gives you a sense of healing. I've come to find that it sort of gives me that, which is a bonus. I'll move on to the next question. The next question is, do you always have to share your story? And I guess, why do you write or perform as well?
Why do I write? Well, I began writing poetry because I thought I kind of had to, it was the way for me to explain really on the page what I couldn't understand really in the reality and the life that was happening around me. I really wanted to capture it somehow, and writing came to be the way for me. Sorry, what was the second part of the question?
The second part is really, do you always feel the need to share your story? Or do you always have to?
No, I don't. Well, through writing, I do want to share my story. There is always part of me, big chunk of me that goes into the story. But I'm also writing with a bit of responsibility towards my family and towards my friends as well, as we write with the idea to be published at the end.
Yes.
So I think that really needs to be done with care and great consideration. Yes. So.
Cecile?
Your question again?
Well, really, for you, why do you write or why do you perform? It's really the main bit of the question.
Yeah. I think for me, I write a lot, but I always feel like a fraud when people say, why do you write? Or are you a writer? Because I've never really had anything published in that sense. Yeah. So I write a lot of things, but for myself. And I write for expression. I like, to express myself, but also to capture my present moment.
Sure.
I find that in writing, you write now, and then, say, 2 years later, you look back on what you wrote, and it's different. And it's interesting to see where you were at that, in that particular moment. So I write for myself, I write to express myself.
Sure.
I feel like a fraud otherwise, people say,
Kind of like keeping a record of a certain time, for instance.
Yeah, more so.
It's fair to say that a lot of you does go into the stories anyway as well.
Yes, I think it's almost inevitable.
Yeah. Paula?
I think that I perform to encourage people to have hope, to see that they're not the only people feeling what they're feeling, that we're all very similar deep down.
Yeah.
That the kind of stations on their journey are experienced by others, and that we can lean on one another.
Yeah.
In many ways, I perform for my high school self.
Yeah.
Listening, because I feel if you have something to offer and you withhold it, it's it's kind of like cheaping out on people. So.
No, I totally agree. I perform because of ego, I'll be honest. And I don't mind the perks that being an actor. People don't understand the setbacks that you have, the amount of auditions that I didn't get a call back for. I mean, there's a lot of lows, but there's also a lot of highs. But I really do it, for me, I think I do it more so to really just prove to myself that I can, and I've come such a long way, and that I deserve to be in that stage, and really sort of share my story with the rest of the world. Now I've got...
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I chose to write poetry initially because I thought writing a poem is going to be a lot quicker than writing a novel. So that was kind of my way through it. But no, it didn't happen that way. It took me 10 years for collection to come together. So no shortcuts.
Oh, wait, no shortcuts indeed. For me, probably the most poetry I've ever attempted is, some love letters, that sort of stuff. I can tell Paul he's a bit of a romantic like myself. Must be that Egypt Sudanese thing, I guess, right? But tell us more in terms of sharing your life story. As in, what do you think you'd like everyone to sort of kind of know about you later or way after you're gone, for instance, in terms of what legacy would you like to leave behind, in other words?
Well, do I always begin first? Okay. So I would like, for example, yes, if a reader captures the title of my collection and goes and spends some time reading it, I would probably like for a reader to find a word in the whole collection, one word that would trigger something positive and something that would make this reader go and do something really great for the society or humanity the next day.
Yeah. So, well answered indeed. Yourself, Cecile?
For myself, I have benefited a lot from the stories of many different people. So throughout high school and primary school, I felt very ashamed of being an African. I found every excuse to hide that, although you can't really hide this, can you? I found that I was given permission to explore that and to be that through, by observing, Aboriginal people's dances and storytelling. And I thought, wow, this is beautiful. And, they look like us. I wonder if we have this in our culture. And I would ask my parents and so forth. And then, in Malaysia, they celebrate just about everything, Eid, Christmas, just about everything. And so for me, I like the idea of a citizen of the world. I really like the idea that as a human being, you belong. Well, you should feel free on Earth. As long as you're respectfully exploring other parts of the world, you shouldn't feel like an invader, if you're doing it respectfully. So I think for me, I would hope to, I suppose, give others the hope that they can do that, or that it's okay to do that. Yeah.
Beautifully said, Cecile. Paula? Legacy.
Have you ever heard the saying, each one teach one?
Yes.
I'd just love to encourage and console those in whoever happens to be in my immediate sphere, in the hope that they then do the same.
Yeah.
And hopefully with that encouragement and consolation, the world can be a slightly better place.
Oh, you certainly do that. Thank you. I think for me, it's really about telling a story and giving it honesty. If I'm portraying a character that looks like me, then I want to give it honesty and truth. But I think inevitably, I want to have a set of work that basically just kind of expresses the things that I'm passionate about. Things like Stateless, for instance, were was one of those projects, where you sort of think, wow, that was really cool to be a part of. And, it's great to be creative when those things happen. But ladies and gentlemen, please, let's thank our panel. Questions? Just quickly, please, let's welcome Deb Stringer from ARA, who's going to give us a signing off as well.
Okay, Stefan, I would have been quite happy not to be the last speaker of the evening after those amazing contributions. Weren't they the most amazing speakers? So I'm not going to speak for very long because why would I after all of that beauty? But I do want to do some thank yous. But I just wanted to quickly talk about why we do this. I mean, obviously we do it with the Hawke Centre because they've got an amazing space and they're wonderfully supportive, and we do love working with them. It's a great combination, I think. But I wanted to also actually introduce one of my staff who's on her phone, but she's probably posting. The inspiration for tonight's Refugee Week conversation really came from some conversations that Musa and I are having, stemming from her work in high schools in the northern suburbs of Adelaide, but also some of discussions around literature. One of the most powerful books that I read as a young English teacher when I was developing a reading list for my students was a novel by Chinua Achebe, a very famous African writer. And it was probably one of the very early novels I read from another culture and from a very different culture, not a European culture. And so for those of us who love poetry, who love books, who love reading or performance or dance, we should never underestimate just how powerful it is to hear other people's stories, to hear stories other than our own, and to have the privilege of actually having people share their stories with us. So that was our inspiration for this evening. The second part of our challenge was we are trying not to exploit all these amazing voices and human beings with their stories, because people shouldn't have to be expected to share their story just because they've been a refugee or a migrant. So luckily these people are in the public space, and so we thought, oh, maybe they will be happy to share their story. So thank you so much, everyone. So first of my list of thank yous, I hope I can call you Uncle, Frank Wanganeen. Thank you so much for allowing us to share Ghana land and to share some of the other cultures in this wonderful land that is yours and your families and your families' families and your ancestors through time immemorial. We are definitely on Aboriginal land. Can I also thank the Honourable Emily Burke, Assistant Minister to the Premier. He's a little busy beaver, isn't he? And I think he will keep you very busy. So I really do appreciate the time you've been able to take to join us tonight. Thank you so much, Emily. So Jacinta and the wonderful team here, Renee and others, we get there in the end, don't we? So thank you so much for this wonderful partnership, much appreciated. Yes, let's keep trying to do it. I also wanted to thank some other people tonight, Ian Murchland, the Deputy Chair of the ARA Board, and the other ARA Board members here tonight, obviously my wonderful staff who've come, Michelle Taylor and Josephine Lampshed from Home Affairs, the Africans Women's Federation, where I saw the girls, there they are. Thank you and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming, staff and students of Adelaide Secondary School of English, Mandy Paul for the Migration Museum, and all of the wonderful supporters and donors to ARA, and anybody whom I have failed to mention. I do want to mention a few things before I do my final thank yous. If you do get a chance to come back and look at the arts exhibition that Stefan has talked about, It's got young people's art, it's got adult artists whose work is for sale, and it's got Afghan films from the Ghan Film Festival. I suggest you come back during the week between Monday and Wednesday when it's still on, so you've got time to really absorb it and have a look, because there's some amazing stuff there, and it's an hour of your time just to even look at the film. So I would encourage you to come back during the week before it gets closed if you can. But lastly, I want to thank all of our fabulous, wonderful speakers. We didn't stalk any of you, but we did find most of you on social media. Thank God for social media. Paula Fanus, I have been to Egypt. It's one of the countries I love most in the world. I love Egyptian culture, and I'm so glad that you have come to Australia and your family is sharing Egyptian culture in Australia, because it's a pretty integral part of Australia, I think.
Thank you.
And I'm not religious, but I think you're an amazing preacher.
Oh, you're very kind.
Cecile, Saeedy. Did I get it right?
Yes, you did.
Cecile is the only person I knew before I asked all the wonderful speakers to come. But I'm really I can't wait to see to be going to the African village experience in November. So please, we'll post that and promote that as much as we can when you give us the details when it's all sorted. But that sounds absolutely amazing. Jelena? Dinic? Again, another amazing contribution. I'm really excited to find out that Jelena is actually working in the education department, because we're very passionate about what happens to young people in schools and how schools and the education system give every young person a voice and makes them feel makes them feel valued. And so on a professional, personal level, I'm very excited to meet Jelena tonight, but also I am actually really excited to read more of her poetry. And I do think perhaps one of the invisible groups of refugees or former refugees are people from the Balkans, from Serbia and Croatia and Bosnia and others, because maybe they've slipped quietly into Australia, maybe because there's not the visible difference, that people don't realise that these are people who've been through a refugee experience as well, much of the time. But it's also that this is just another wonderful culture that's become part of Australian culture. So much to celebrate. Thank you. And Stefan, is that's right, isn't it? Right. Stefan Tongan. I can't not say this, I'm sorry, but the film Spiderhead that he actually had billing in, he's one of the top 10 billed actors in the film, was with the Hemsworth brothers. I mean, it's a pretty big film.
They picked the cast on looks, clearly.
Pardon?
They picked the cast on looks, clearly.
Sorry, I just had to leave that till last. But Stefan, you have been an amazing MC. I can't thank you enough. He literally did get off a plane from New York yesterday, so we were actually worried that the plane might not actually fly out of New York at the right time. And we're very worried about Paula as well, because even just getting from Victoria these days is a bit of a challenge. So thank you so much, everybody. I hope you've all had a great evening. Stay and ask them a couple of questions. Thank you.